life is full of consequences. And I would say almost every decision, act has a consequence to it. Some good, some bad. If we break the speed limit and get caught, there will be consequences. Fortunately, well, I'm not bragging. I've had 2 tickets since driving since I was 16. You know why? A lot of course, that don't mean I didn't deserve more. But and I think we all agree with that. When you get stopped, I put my hands up on the steering wheel, and I'm polite. Don't talk back, and usually that a lot of times I can get you out of a ticket. It's just a warning. The what? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's a proper way to do it when you get stopped. Right. Yeah. I don't think they said I've heard said I don't think it helps to tell them you're a preacher. But worse. Why are you speeding and you're a preacher? Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Mm. But we're all faced. We're faced with consequences. I was thinking when I was preparing this, when I was in high school, in order to graduate, it was required to pass 2 math courses. So I took the easy way out, general math and algebra one. Well, when I enrolled in college, the course requirement was freshman algebra 101. To my surprise, algebra 101 began where high school algebra 2 left off. Well, I was lost. I didn't have a clue. Everybody's taking algebra. If you miss one step, you're in trouble. It's because everything ties together. So, in other words, I didn't prepare myself to take college algebra, and I paid the consequences. I also had a professor who would walk into class, write a problem on the blackboard, start at one end to the other, and write all the way through. Somebody would ask, "How'd you get that answer?" And he said, "Off the end of this chalk." And they encourage you when you're struggling to go to conference. So I even went to conference to this professor, and his words were, "Weren't you paying attention in class?" I mean, that was it. So I made a WF in that course, withdraw while failing. I hate to say I probably need more than one, but today we began a study in the book of Judges. But yeah, made up on tickets. Yeah, I did. Well, a lot of it I did. My work was a lot of geometry, but I could do it my own way. If I could do as long as I got the answer. I mean, and we had. I had several coworkers. We'd have to compute concrete quantities and everything. Every one of us figured it different, but we'd come up with the same answer. Yeah, yeah. I never will forget. We're standing in the chow line one day. The college, this guy standing in line. He said, "I'm dropping calculus." He said, "Yesterday they said 2 and 2 was 4. Today they said 3 and 1 was 4." Can't make up their mind. Okay, but today we begin studying the book of Judges. Unfortunately, it covers a dark side of the nation of Israel. The history of the Israelites reads like a leadership roller coaster. God chose Moses to supervise the liberation of his people from Egypt and to lead the nation to the wilderness to the borders of Canaan. Then Joshua came along to guide them across the Jordan River, command enemies in victory, and oversee the subsequent land distribution among the tribes. Both Joshua's death created a tremendous leadership void that triggered a cycle of sin, judgment, confession, and restoration. In Judges 17:6 reads, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes." Oh, isn't that sad? That's everyone did what they thought was just do your own thing. Moses what it's saying. Some scholars speculate that Samuel wrote the book of Judges. Now we can't be sure, but the narrative span a period of approximately 300 years. That's hard to. That the time of Judges was 300 years, but we don't know. Some just speculate that he wrote it. But during that time, the people endured seasons of oppression and liberation. In each crisis point, God raised up judges. So if we look at our lesson text today, someone read Judges 2:11 through 15. I'm going to go back here right quick and read Judges 1:1. So now it came about after the death of Joshua that the sons of Israel inquired of the Lord, saying, "Who shall go up first for us against the Canaanites to fight against them?" This passage begins with a general statement regarding Israel's behavior. They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baal. The people didn't complete the task. To see if we read Deuteronomy 7:1 through 5. Okay, I gave you the hard one, didn't I? That's fine, 1 through 5, but that's good. I'm good. Uh, when Joshua died, it really wasn't complete to take the land. Now, and we look later on in the lesson, we'll begin to kind of look a little like things are not really matching. But what God told us, wipe them out. And it wasn't complete uh, when when Joshua had died. And we go when we further into the lesson into Joshua that they didn't complete the task. But John, if you'll read 20:16 through 18. Okay. All them others, wasn't it? Yeah, all them others. Yeah. Yeah, no termites. Yeah. But it's strange that well, I don't know why they didn't complete the task. And and I think we can see a reason when we look further into the scripture today. But to serve meant to serve, it says the Lord, and to serve the Baals. Here, serve meant to abandon generally relates to leaving or forsaking. It can have a positive meaning, but here it is negative. That highlights the Israelites' tendency to turn their backs on God and His covenant. Moses had warned the people to avoid forgetting God and His ordinances in Deuteronomy 8:11. Unfortunately, Joshua's death in Judges 2:8 created a leadership vacuum and left Israel to the influence of its enemies. Again, they were to wipe them out. As a result, they began replacing their one true God with other gods. Rather, worshiping the one who had delivered them, provided for them, led them into the promised land, the people followed other gods from the surrounding people. How soon we forget. God was with them over 4 years in the desert, in the wilderness, and led them into Israel, led them into battle, and yet they soon forget. And it's hard to me to understand. Oh, we're guilty too. But they pledged their alliance to Baal and Ashtaroth. Baal, the Canaanite god of weather and nature, lured people for obvious reasons. As an agricultural society, the residents of Canaan depended on favorable weather conditions for their crops and livestock. The Ashtoreth, a female counterpart to Baal, represented the goddess of sex and fertility. In this worship, prostitution was permitted, even encouraged. You imagine the Israelites had gone so far that they were taking part of this, practicing this religion of sex and prostitution. As a result of their unfaithfulness, the Lord's anger burned against them. One translation uses the word hot was against them. You know, if you put your hand on a hot stove, it burns, doesn't it? Well, we should learn our lesson. I don't know if they have learned their lesson yet, but there are going to be consequences, isn't it? The Israelites found themselves on the receiving end of God's anger. They were burned. It was anger. They got hot. There's a saying, you know, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. Well, that has a lot of meanings again to it.
Testing one,
if you play
two.
with sin, you're going to get burned.
Testing, yeah.
So impulsive in his anger. He does not take sin lightly. You know, sometimes we take that too lightly. But God does not take sin lightly. It's serious business. Later, when the people brazenly complained in the wilderness, God's anger blazed among them and consumed the outskirts of the camp. In Numbers 11:1. Centuries later, God again poured out his anger on Israel for its idolatry and handed the city of Jerusalem over to the Babylonians in Jeremiah 39. And that's when King Zedekiah was king of Israel. He escaped, but they caught him and Nebuchadnezzar put his eyes out. Horrible, isn't it? Terrible. But the Lord sent marauders or plunderers and other hostile groups attacked Israel, and without God's support, the Israelites could no longer resist their enemies. As a result, they suffered greatly. They were described as marauders. I looked at, really that wasn't really armies of people. They were just like guerrillas and mercenary bands and coming in and attack. They, kind of hit and run, and they were hard to defend against. But they were operating independently, outside of formal military discipline, to attack settlements, trade routes, or enemy supplies. They were kind of in hiding, come out at several times and hit when they were vulnerable, and kind of like I said, hard to defend against them. And so you never knew when they might hit. But they were difficult, like I said, to defend against. The people could no longer resist their enemies. As a result, they suffered greatly. How soon they forget that they forgot. Before entering Canaan, Moses warned them of the consequences and curses of disobedience. They soon forget. The absent generation that forgot. The first one just said, well, we're going to follow Joshua. And they did. But after that generation's gone, then they just slowly regress back into sin. To protect it, someone read now verses 16 through 10. did I say? 16 through 10, didn't it? 19. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Okay, you're right. 16 through 19. Another typo. That computer. I just don't think. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Stiff neck. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, yes. But to see that, we go to study that, we'll see where he lifted his hand from them, too. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, my God's a loving God. And His grace is great. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why I wrote down 16 through 10. Made me think I had a supervisor that hit me on a calculator. What's wrong with this calculator? Well, what's wrong with my computer? That's right. That's what it is. Yes. To protect and direct His wayward people, the Lord raised up judges. Now, these judges were not like modern day judges today who are to be supposed to be impartial arbitrators of the law. Sometimes we wonder and see, but the judges the Lord raised up were primary military leaders, raised up by God in times of crisis to rescue the tribes of Israel for oppression. They occasionally settled civil disputes. Often, I'll say that. Othniel, what I said, was the first judge chosen by God. Othniel. Now he's either younger brother or nephew of Caleb. Now Samson, we all know about Samson, uh, who some claim was the last, but was they say probably Eli was the last judge. He was also a priest. Uh, some scripture does some support where Samson was the last judge. Uh, but he's also, like I said, Eli served also as a judge for 40 years. And their positions, they saved God's people from the attacking marauders. As mentioned earlier, they were guerrillas, bandits, and outlaws. No doubt the people were thrilled to be rescued. However, spiritually, they did not listen to their judges. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? This should bring to mind the behavior of the Jews centuries later. Despite repeated warnings, they would not listen to God's messengers, remained obstinate, stubborn, and unyielding, and turned their backs on him. Rather than obeying God, the people played the harlot, NAS, by following false gods. Here they had committed spiritual adultery against God through idolatry. You know, that's really harsh. The scriptures say they they played the harlot. Hmm? It's just, I think you become uh, seared, your mind, yes. Like I've said before, we've always said a person doesn't come to church and they feel bad, and then next time, before you know it, no conscience and nothing about attending the church. And I think they had gone so deep in sin that they were no, they were just oblivious to it. In other words, it didn't matter to them anymore. And But but the people, like they say, they turned. The God scripture says they turned away from their ancestors. Israel worshiped God throughout Jacob's life. However, as the older generation faded, the new generation drifted. Well, they say we're one generation away from a heathen nation. Yes, right. No, not a thought. And it's hard, and people don't imagine. It's hard for us. We realize it. It's hard at times. Our life on earth is just a blink of an eye compared to eternity, and it's hard to kind of me to wrap my head around that. Uh, but we accept it. But again, readers are reminded of the importance of solid leadership. When the judges have died, leadership fails. I said the good to me a good leadership is when they are gone, their work continues on, and that's to me that's a sign. And I've always said a good teacher is one that he teaches his students better than them, and to take the task and to teach better. Based on I thought you said something. Based on a Lifeway study, 66 to 75% of the youth that grow up in church leave church after leaving home for at least a year. That's startling, isn't it? They grow up in church. As soon as they get away from mama and daddy, you might say, they leave the church. They said at least one third eventually come back. So what is the cause? What is the cause of this? Other interests, peers, other factors. We can just go and name several. Why they just trust, independent, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I know it is. It takes a while sometimes more than others. I mean, commitment. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Oh, yes. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Sure it is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I heard Ed Young say one time, I've said it before, I think, but he said you bring up your children, you raise them, you influence them, and then you take them to college. When you get out of the car, there's that professor said, "You're mine now." It's true. A lot of it's true. But all you can do is teach them the best, and just pray that they'll continue on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I'm reminded of another one too. Spare the rod and you spoil the child. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Robert said you're not going to kill him. Hmm. Yeah, hmm, yeah, sure. Right. Yes, and every child's different. You really, even though sometimes they're disciplined, not going in the same way. Sometimes it's just a word, sometimes that rod, some, so you don't know. But what? Yeah, the spoon, yeah, the track. Remember them Hot Wheels tracks? Yeah. But the rise and fall during the ages of the judges defined Israel's cycle of sin. God's people remained faithful to a point, but when a judge died, they fell further into sin than the previous one. The pattern seemed to remain the same. After a judge died, the people would behave corruptly. They would serve other gods and bow and worship to them. What's the old saying? When the cat's away, the mouse will play. That's what was happening here with Israel. I mean, this happens even today, even with us sometimes. You know. We think nobody's watching. Uh, what? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, I know. It just, and I think you use the word easy, but it's so easy to slip back. Uh, it's human nature. That's why we have to say in the word. Yeah. He's right there. He's right there. There's times, well, something will enter into my mind, and I'll have to say, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. And of course, we went to had a class reunion yesterday. Of course, talked. Well, there was all good memories. There was probably some bad, but we didn't bring them up. But they would refuse to turn from their evil practices, and they would become obstinate in their sin. Obstinate, someone who stubbornly refuses to change their opinion, behavior, or course of action, despite attempts to persuade them to do otherwise. Oh, isn't that obstinate? I mean, stubborn hard-headedness. You can't tell me what to do. I've had people that say, nobody tells me what to do. I said, well, you have a job? Yeah. What time you can go to work? Somebody's telling you what time to go to work, isn't it? But we've seen it, heard it, even probably maybe our kids mess at it. You can't tell me what to do, you know. But then as a result of the Israelites' disobedience, the Lord would remove his protection and allow the people to be overwhelmed by their enemies. Oh, that's getting serious. When God removes his protection, takes his hand off of them. In time, Israel groaned because of those who were oppressing and afflicting. But by grace, God was moved to pity and raised up a judge to rescue the people. Then the nation would know peace for a while. The judge was still alive. Unfortunately, once the leader died, though, the cycles began again. Just like a circle, just over and over and over. They were commanded to wipe the people out of Canaan. Again, they were commanded to wipe them out. So I'm going to read now Judges 20 through 23. I believe I got that right. That's strange, isn't it? mean, we'll get further into it, but church at first, they were supposed to wipe them out, eliminate them, everything. Home, property, animals, everything. But then there he says he left, God left it, a portion of it. One might think that such a demonstration of mercy would set the Israelites back on the straight and narrow. Unfortunately, such was not the case. Time and time again, the cycle of sin continued, and thus the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Again, I think that I've had it. This brings to mind the words written during the wilderness wandering, attributing. Now, this is what I had to check to verify this. Look, the writer said this wilderness wandering, the Psalms 90 attributed to Moses, wrote this. Well, he did. I thought, well, that's new to me. But he wrote that God's anger matches the fear of reverence that he deserves. Psalm 90:11. Who is it? B. Here's the fear of their more than retribution planned out against the children of Israel because of their disobedience. In the era of Judges, the Israelites consistently violated their covenant with God, prompting divine displeasure. Eventually, God declared he had seen them. Really, in a way, God said, I'm throwing up my hands. I'm through. I throw up my hands, and eventually said, and I've had it. How many times maybe we declared that with maybe a child is disobedient or something, finally said, I'll just throw up my hands. I've had it. Yes, I remember. Maybe that was a child. Maybe it was us, our parents. I'm, I'm through. Just get out of here. But go to your room. Yes, yes. But you know, everyone we maybe we were that rebellious child. I don't know, but God said, you know, I've had it. I'm through with it. I'm through with it. But God declared, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations Joshua left when he died. We look back and we go into further that we wonder, why did God say that? When he said drive them out, there's a reason. There's a reason. In a sense, God was letting the Israelites feel the negative consequences of living among people with whom they had become so infatuated. They what? Yes, yes. They wanted to be slaves to their idols of Canaan. They could become slaves to the enemies of Canaan if they wanted. Allowing Israel's enemies in the promised land to exert their dominance over his chosen people was not God's only purpose in this punishment. He had at least two other reasons for letting them endure such suffering. First, he noted that he wanted to test Israel. Now, he wanted to see if the stress would encourage them to keep the Lord's way, and their ancestors had, or if they would keep rebelling against and resisting God. Now, the Hebrews rendered test means to evaluate the quality of an item, or metaphorically as individual character. The idea relates to making sure something is real or has substance. Throughout Scripture, God put his people into situations where they needed to trust him. Although God never tempts us to sin, he will certainly put his people through times of testing and trial. That's what God was doing here. He was putting them through testing and trial. We think of testing of Abraham when he was told to sacrifice Isaac. We think of testing of Job, what all he went through. I've said if anyone had a reason to turn against him. But God showed himself faithful in both situations. If God put the testing in front of Israel and they turned back to him, he would show himself faithful to the situations they were in. You know, we have all gone through trials and tests in our faith. All of them. Anyone says they hadn't, they better check things out. Yes. Whenever situation believers might face, the Lord's purposes will always focus on making us better and molding us into the image of God. If these trials and tribulations were not in front of us, how is that going to mold us and make us better images of His of our time? And you know, sometimes we don't welcome them. I don't. The writer noted that, went up and said, well, God, give me some more tests. The writer noted that the Lord left these nations in the promised land, and he wrote that he did not hand them over to Joshua. That raises the question as to why God would allow a smattering of pagans to remain in the promised land. The real food for thought when God commanded his people to wipe them out, but they didn't complete the task. There are several thoughts, that one of these in the passage also emphasized God's sovereignty and control over the affairs of the people. Joshua lived a life marked by complete obedience to the Lord. Yet the writer notes that God was the one who allowed some of the Canaanites to stand on him. This was not a failure on the part of Joshua, but God's plan to use these pagans to perfect his people. Again, the generation had not fought the physical and spiritual battles of the conquering generation. They had to prove their own loyalty to God, and the remnant of Canaanites was part of God's plan. We also live in a world with sin around us. God could have wiped it all out, sin all around us. But it's our choice which direction we take. It is by God's grace, though, we choose to take this direction. We think about things, look at our situation here today. And as may trivia as it may sound, that's what I was talking this morning. I can remember growing up, movies were closed on Wednesdays and Sundays. Schools scheduled their activities around the church. Blue laws. Now we think, well, that's kind of trivial. Isn't that a start? Isn't that where Satan gets his foot in the door? Then now we have sports series, Little League baseball games, and all those things on Sundays. And everything is scheduled on Sundays, just like we see the mail running on Sundays. Uh, and I heard, I think when we went to Bill Custer, he said, talk about working on Sundays. You can work on Sundays with God, with Satan gets that. I think there's a lot of truth to that. That money you make on Sundays or out of the church, not being in the Lord's house. You look at Malachi. God, he says, it turns out to let Satan have that. But like I said, and that just gets deeper and deeper and deeper. Like I said, what we see on what's on TV, and it just, I get so sick and tired of every word they use now, the F word, and it's just commercials. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 And the influences that are just subtle influences. I know there was a commercial years ago. I think it was Coors, and they have this commercial, and they say, of course, this is an adult, this is a drink, whatever, an adult drink and everything. But yet, the people, the ones they used in that commercial, didn't look 21. They had to be, but they didn't look 21. They looked like teenagers. Well, that was a subtle, and it's just, and we're just bombarded with it every day. But yet, God has allowed that in a way for us really to stand up in how far we've gone and how far uh, tolerant we've become in our church and what we've allowed in our church. And it's, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Program for a reason. Exactly. Any other comments? Another few minutes. No. No. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. But I wonder. To me, and it's concerning to me and to others. Is God going to remove His hand from our nation? That's a good. It's scary. Yeah, yeah, right. Sure, right, exactly. But I think, and we say it, and which is true. God is in control, but that don't mean we just sit on our rear end and not doing things. Yeah. Hmm. Sure. Hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Right. That's true. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Well, there's times we really don't realize how much influence we do have on our children and others. Uh, my grandkids don't come to the house wearing a beer t-shirt and or a cap, and they know better. They know not to do that, and things like that. But yeah, and like I said, sometimes it takes years for that influence to sink in and take hold. Well, Larry's showing me his watch, so I guess we better go. Yeah. Yes, Cecilia. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. They say with Jesus. Yeah.